Psychology is fascinating. So fascinating it's become one of the most popular study subjects in the UK. Why? Because it's all about people. You and me, we can all relate to it. It's the scientific study of the mind, including why our minds function in the way that they do. Psychologists attempt to explain why we do what we do and how we feel. Some of the different approaches to psychology include cognitive and behavioural psychology, developmental psychology, physiological psychology and individual differences, and social psychology. Whatever the approach is used, the findings are always based on research. These main methods of research are case studies, experiments, observations, and surveys and interviews. Now let's go back over to Will in the studio to find out more.
Thanks, Jess. Let's look at some case studies now. These look at individual cases. This creates a rich source of qualitative data. Now, the problem is that the data isn't quantitative, so we can't necessarily generalise from these studies. Case studies generally include a variety of different methods of generating research data, such as case histories, psychometric tests, and so on. With experiments, it depends on where they're conducted. Now, if they're carried out in a laboratory, and as such easier to control, they are considered more scientific. But because they're contrived, they lack ecological validity, meaning they may not be considered true to life. On the other hand, experiments can also be carried out in a natural setting. These are called field experiments. They are viewed as more true to life, or at least have a greater ecological validity. What the researcher is looking for in both cases are causal relationships between variables. Now, observations. Now, these can be tricky. This is because sometimes a correlation is noticed between two factors, but this doesn't necessarily mean that one causes the other, so validity can be a problem. So, the last research method, surveys. Now, these can be carried out using questionnaires or interview. Let's start with questionnaires. Now, on the plus side, these can reach loads of people at the same time, especially postal surveys. So the sample can be huge. However, people are not always truthful when answering questionnaires and may give the answers they think the experimenter wants to hear, rather than what the true answer is. Now, added to this, not everyone in the sample would complete the questionnaire, as it may be too long or difficult to fill in. To try to avoid this, the questionnaire has to be carefully constructed so it is easy to understand and doesn't take too long filling in. It also needs to be simple so it can be analysed statistically. Interviews involve one-to-one questioning, are very time-consuming, and people may not be honest in their answers. Is there any method which is foolproof? For each module you study, you'll need to be aware of the research findings that led to the theories. You may also need to know about other findings that support the theory, or about studies that don't support the theory. Although psychology tries to be scientific, many assumptions are made when applying each approach. Now, you need to be aware of these and be able to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of each method. It's important to be able to evaluate. You need to look at the flaws and the good points in the methodology of the studies and the theories. You also need to be able to judge whether the findings have any useful applications to our lives. Don't worry, you certainly don't have to agree with all the findings that are given in the specifications, but you do need to be able to discuss the findings in a balanced and logical way, giving evidence to support your views. And even though you may not agree with the findings of studies, there are certain studies where you're expected to know the specific details, such as the basic aims, procedures, findings, conclusions, and at least one evaluation point. The point may be a strength or a weakness relating to a particular issue, such as ethical considerations or ethnocentrism. And remember, you need to back up your arguments by using case studies.